So, the reason that we are together today is that you had this idea for a new
Mhm.
series called Suffragette Uprising. And so, you are the first book and also my first interview, but I'm hoping to have each author publishing in the Suffragette Uprising series as a guest on the podcast. So, yours is the first book, A Spine of Steel. What can we expect from this story, and what is your vision for the series overall?
So, what you can expect from the story? Well, this story is actually set in Victorian era America in a small town, and I actually took this setting that is in my contemporaries and just took it back 150 years.
Oh,
So,
cool.
so it's actually in Willow Creek, Virginia, but it's in the 1880s. Um, so I really, really wanted to focus my narrative and my plotting on the Comstock Act because I think it's going to become more and more prevalent and more important to our discourse of, reading romance, the distribution of romance, what it means to publishing, what it means to, women's empowerment. So my heroine comes into conflict with the law. You'll figure out why in the excerpt that I read, but yeah, she comes into conflict with that law, and the whole premise of the book is, talks about the law and why it's ridiculous. Basically, it also involves the hero like having an epiphany of his own, kind of like, oh, I get it now. Because he is actually the town's prosecuting attorney, so yeah, so he once she is found in violation, he is the one that's tasked with bringing her to justice.
Ooh, gotta love an enemies to lover.
Yes, but he's also her brother's best friend, and they've grown up together. So there's also like that dynamic. Yeah,
Amazing. All
yeah,
right. Well, do you want to get into the reading and then we can talk about the series and
sure.
everything later?
Diogenes Castellano was an arrogant, self-righteous ass. Perry knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that he was the single most infuriating man on the planet. But sometimes Pericles Trenton stared at his mouth and forgot her name and how to speak. And Pericles Trenton was never speechless because crafting words was her stock in trade. For the last 5 years, she'd single handedly been running the Willow Creek Crier. She was the reporter, the writer, the editor in chief, and primary hawker. She was also the secret translator of a series of scandalous Italian memoirs about the lives of 16th century Venetian courtesans and their escapades. Her tongue tied behavior around the man who tormented her since childhood was nonsensical. He captivated her in some devilish display of power she couldn't make heads or tails of. When her brother's tall, bespectacled best friend swiped a stray drop of applejack from the rim of his glass with his tongue, or closed his eyes as he wrapped his mouth around a spoonful of chocolate mousse, Perry was rendered both speechless and witless. She wanted to leap across the table and grab his chin. Soup tureen be damned. She wanted to clamber over the half-empty platter of roast and lick away the spot of chocolate caught in his dimple, because it was slowly driving her mad. She wanted to toss the half-full pitcher of peppered gravy in his direction, and then reach across the table and lift his glasses from his face on the pretense of cleaning them, which she would accomplish by sitting down beside him and lifting her skirt so she could use her petticoat. Doing that would bare her ankle, and she hoped the innocuousness of it would upend him the same way she was upended by the way his throat bobbed when he laughed. Every time he let loose a gusty whoop, she had to bite her tongue so she wouldn't lean forward and bite his Adam's apple. Their fathers had been the best of friends at Harvard. Their shared love of classics and fine whiskey had led to a lifelong attachment, an attachment so pronounced, Dio's father had followed his friend from Boston to Willow Creek. They'd served together in the war between the states and returned to raise their families side by side. Diogenes, or Dio, as her brothers called him, had been a fixture in her house for as long as she could remember. That had been all well and good until the summer she turned 21. The annual baseball game after the town picnic could become quite boisterous. Her two brothers were dead ringer pitchers, and even though her mother said it wasn't genteel, Terry always ended up behind the home plate as a catcher. That summer, at that game, Dio went down in a pile of dust when her brother Archimedes threw a wild pitch. Perry had crashed to her knees, and when he'd opened his eyes, she'd noticed how velvety soft they were behind his mangled spectacles, like the ears of the pet rabbit she carried around everywhere she went when she was 7. And then she noticed his lips, the firm upper one with the very pronounced bow just hidden by his mustache, and the plush right bottom one like a juicy strawberry that was framed by his dark beard. For the last 5 years, she hadn't been able to stop noticing his lips. She was noticing them now, the way they scraped against his fork and melted around his spoon. What are you staring at, Termagant? He set around a mouthful of boiled potatoes. She wasn't about to confess why she was transfixed. Do you have to scrape the fork against your teeth every single time you take a bite? It borders on uncouth. He gave her an unrepentant grin and scraped it again. But these are excellent boiled potatoes. She didn't want to laugh or smile, but she couldn't help herself. Thankfully, as annoying as you can be, you are no Mr. Collins. He gave her one of the rare smiles that just turned up the corner of his beguiling lips. I see your opinion of me has improved since you were 15. You called me a lout then because I wouldn't swim into the middle of the pond and tow your sinking canoe back to shore. You claimed even Mr. Collins would have expended the effort, if only to ingratiate himself. Perry was never going to betray how far he moved up in the ranks of her esteem. She set her spoon beside her empty bowl and narrowed her eyes at him. As I said, you're no Mr. Collins. She smirked. But you're no Darcy either. You're more like Wickham. He set his spoon down and returned her glare. I beg your pardon. His voice rose at the end of the question, and Perry gleefully reveled in the fact her insult had gotten under his skin. Archie thumped Theo between the shoulder blades. Are you frowning at my sister again? Her brother found it hilarious when they squabbled, and always refrained from taking sides. Perry resented his shaky loyalties. Why do you care, Archie? Aren't Dio and I always frowning at each other? The expression on the face of her arch nemesis lightened, and he shook his head as if to clear it. Pericles Andromeda Trenton was trouble. Trouble in the form of a shrew with a tongue so sharp it blistered whoever she turned it on. But sometimes Dia wanted to haul her over the crowded table and into his lap so he could kiss away her scowl. When she was seated across from him, he forgot that the docket of petty and not so petty crimes he was prosecuting should be his first priority. This was one of those times, because she'd called him Dio. His nickname didn't sound the same falling from those rosebud lips. It sounded like praise or a plea. He wanted it to be both. And his I won't say that word. Turned painfully hard at the thought of what circumstances would elicit either. He wanted her to say his nickname and call him her god. He knew his desire was sacrilegious and filthy, but every single night he dreamt about showing her he'd prefer if she used her tongue for something other than filleting him alive with its barbed edges. He didn't purposefully frown at her. His frown just emerged of its own volition whenever she was near, like it had been hiding in his pocket, waiting for the perfect opportunity. There wasn't much else Dio could do. What reaction was he expected to have when everything about his best friend's little sister both confounded and enthralled him? Dio cleared his throat. It wasn't a frown. Perry nodded in agreement. He's right. It wasn't a frown. It was a scowl, almost a snarl. It was neither of those things, he half-heartedly protested. He was lying through his teeth. It had probably been both. Why were you not frowning, Mr. Squarehead? Mr. Squarehead, I am not unyielding, Pericles. She turned a laughing face to her brother. I have rumpled him, Archie. Perry, leave Dio alone and sharpen your claws somewhere else. She stuck her tongue out at her brother and gave Dio a nod. I'll give you a reprieve for now. He dipped his head in kind and gave her a sarcastic smile. How magnanimous of you.